So welcome everyone to the Singapore Literary Festival's Killer Women, 2 countries, 3 cultures, and countless crimes, or as I like to think of it, the murder and mayhem part of the festival. The name of the festival this year is Singapore Unbound. And Unbound is really the perfect metaphor for the passions that are set loose in crime fiction. We're talking about life and death and crime, and Unbound is really what happens to human emotions in our neck of the woods of literature. We're indeed fortunate to have with us S.J. Rozan, a nationwide bestseller, a New York Times bestseller, major crime fiction. And when she arrives, the wonderful Ovidia Yu, who is a major Singaporean writer of crime fiction in addition to important plays. Each will read a passage from a current work. And then after both authors have read, we'll have a little discussion. I have some questions for them. And then after our discussion, when we discuss what these wonderful women have to say about writing about murder and mayhem and killer women, there'll be a book signing and a little reception, okay? So reading first will be S.J. Rozan. Native New Yorker S.J. Rozan is one of crime fiction's eminent authors. She's a winner of the genre's most notable awards, the Edgar, the Shamus, the Anthony, the Nero, the Macavity, and on and on and on, as well as the Japanese Maltese Falcon Award. So it's fair to say that S.J. Rozan's work has become part of the American canon of crime literature. Her connection to Singapore and Asian culture is not merely parenthetic. She has been a writer in residence at the Singapore Management University, has pursued study of Asian cultures for several years in depth, and weaves her love of Asia and Asian cultures into her stories. S.J. brings her deep knowledge of crime writing and cross-cultural breadth to her very lucky students at New York's Crime Fiction Academy, and in Assisi, Italy, to the Art International Workshop. So please welcome S.J. Rozan, reading from a current work in progress, I understand, from Paper Sun. It's all yours, S.J.
Thank you. I don't know that I can follow that level of animation. Can you see me? Yeah. I sometimes have trouble behind podiums. Thank you. Paper Sun is a crime novel, a private eye novel. Lydia Chin is the protagonist and the first-person narrator. This is the 12th book that Lydia will appear in, a bunch of short stories. She is a 28-year-old Chinese-American living in Chinatown, New York, with her mother. Her 4 older brothers have moved out, and she has an older white male partner named Bill Smith, and this is the beginning of Paper Sun. Mississippi? Ling Wenju, please do not stare with your mouth open in this way. It makes me worried that I did not raise you well. Reaching into her sewing basket, my mother took out the folds of fabric that were in the process of becoming a blouse for my brother Ted's wife. You raised me fine, I said. Only now I think maybe my hearing's going. Mississippi? Actually, I didn't think anything was wrong with my hearing. I thought something was wrong with my mind. I must be hallucinating, except I didn't know which part was craziest. That my mother wanted me to go to Mississippi on a case. That my mother wanted me to go to Mississippi on a case. Or that my mother wanted me to go to Mississippi on a case. So I tried to recover my equilibrium with a different question. Why didn't I ever know we had cousins in the Mississippi Delta? You do not pay attention. My mother threaded her needle. Your father used to get letters from his cousins. One of the wreaths at your father's funeral was sent by the Mississippi cousins. The wreath with the big white bow and the yellow chrysanthemums. My father died 15 years ago, when I was 13. He was a popular man. So many wreaths, sprays, and bouquets crowded the funeral home that it was remarkable bees weren't buzzing around the casket. That I didn't know who'd sent which flowers wasn't surprising, nor was the fact that my mother did, and to this day could tell you. It was likely she also had a comprehensive list of people who'd sent nothing, but that was a different issue. Who are these cousins, and who's the one who's been arrested? That was what she just told me, that I had a cousin in jail in Mississippi, which was a surprise, and that she wanted me to hurry down and get him out, which rocked my world. My mother knotted the thread and smoothed the blouse's collar. Your father's grandfather's brother, Chin Song, came to America in 1915. Her needle started flashing through the fabric, making fast, even stitches. He worked in the grocery store of a man from his village who had come earlier, in Clarksdale, in the delta of Mississippi. I left the delta aside, and the fact that a Chinese person 100 years ago would go there, and then that another Chinese person already had a grocery store there for him to work in, and focused on the family. Yes, Chin Song's descendants qualified as my cousins. Something like my fourth cousins 3 times removed, but we don't cut it fine like that. Our language doesn't even have terms for those things. Older relatives at whatever remove are your aunties and uncles. Besides them and your nieces and nephews, everyone else is a cousin. And now, 4 generations later, behold, I have Mississippi cousins. So who is it who's been arrested? I asked again. A young man, Jefferson Tam. For what? She frowned in distaste. The killing of his father. Ma, I stared at her. Murder? I clamped my mouth shut before any words like can't or don't got out. I was in a real bind. My mother's attitude toward my career as a PI has zigzagged between disgust, disapproval, and active attempts at deterrence on the one hand, and on good days, a kind of pointedly exaggerated patience, a showy expectation that I'll get this out of my system and turn to a pursuit worthy of a good Chinese daughter. That she would ever bring me a case and demand I take it is something I'd never have imagined 5 years or 5 minutes ago. Many things about this profession escape my mother, however. One is that PIs generally don't get involved in homicides. It's understandable she's missed that point on 2 counts. First, some of my past cases actually have included homicides. Once or twice, as soon as the suspicious death showed up, I turned the whole thing over to the cops. But other times, for various reasons, I was in too deep by then, and I just stayed in. Second, as far as my mother's concerned, homicide, tax evasion, and jaywalking are all as bad as each other. Criminals on every level are dangerous, unsavory people, and if I insist on getting involved with them, why draw the line at murder? I watched her sew. In midwinter, the sun never quite makes it into our living room. So though it was barely 2 o'clock, my mother sat in a pool of lamplight. This case could represent the first tiny thaw, the sharp edge of the wedge, the foot in the door. It might mark a change in her attitude toward my career, and it was a case I had no business taking. Tell me all about it, Ma. If I knew all about it, why would you have to investigate? Her needle flicked. Jefferson Tam is innocent. You will find things out, then you will clear all this up. How do you know what happened? She gave me a look as disbelieving as it was disapproving. As usual, you are not listening. I just told you I do not know what happened. But whatever happened, Jefferson Tam did not do this crime. He is your father's cousin. Oh, right. A relative of my sainted father, and therefore incapable of such an act. I see, but that's not what I meant. How do you even know he's in jail? His uncle called me, Captain Pete Tam, from Clarksdale, Mississippi, to ask me to send you there. I was digesting this news. If this uncle knew I was a PI, it could only be because my mother had told him, something I thought she would only ever do if wild horses were dragging it out of her, when she dropped the capper on my weird day with Ma. But do not think for a minute, Lin Wanju, that I will permit you to go to the delta of Mississippi alone. Permit me, it's your idea. Of course it is. You will go help your cousin, but not alone. You will tell the white baboon he has to go with you. So let me get this straight, said my partner, Bill Smith, pouring himself a cup of coffee. An hour after... This is Ovidia.
Yes, hi. And I got lost. So much for detection. Hi, Anne. Sorry.
An hour after being more or less hired by my own mother. Do you say hired when there's no possibility of turning the job down and you can't actually expect to get paid? I was at Bill's Tribeca apartment, a big windowed place above a bar on Lake Street. I already had my mug of green tea and was curled up in the easy chair by the piano. There's lots of tea at Bill's place. Not that he has any idea what to buy in that department. I stock his shelves out of self-interest. Your mother not only wants you to go to Mississippi to work a case, Bill went on, settling with his coffee on the sofa. She wants me to go with you. That's right. Do you think I need to get her a mental health exam? Maybe so. Maybe she's got some weird dementia that makes you sane in your old age. What exactly did she say? She said, I have to go to the Delta, which has never been on my radar as a destination, and which, by the way, I don't think she even knows where it is, to straighten things out because a cousin I never heard of is in jail. But I can't go alone, and I should tell the white baboon he has to come with me. Oh wait, she called me that? Then don't worry, she hasn't lost a step. He took a contemplative sip. In fact, I think we should leave before the echo comes back and she hears herself. Seriously? You're willing to go? Why wouldn't I be? Who wants to get involved in Chin family business if they don't have to, especially for free? You underestimate the enduring fascination of other people's problems. And there's more than one kind of compensation. Your mother wants me to go. If I do, she'll owe me and have to be nicer to me. You know that'll never happen. If it doesn't, then I'll have the moral high ground. And anyway, the Delta, where they eat grits 3 times a day and drink moonshine with their barbecue, where they play the blues deep into the cicada-filled night, where we'll stay in a Motel 6 on Highway 61 with connecting doors between our rooms, that won't happen either. And your mother's right. You need me down there. I speak the language. Y'all are forgetting I'm from Kentucky, born and bred below the Mason-Dixon line. I can talk Southern with the best of them. Please don't do that. It's creepy. Someday you'll be glad I have that skill. But back to this cousin you never heard of. Jefferson Tam, 23, arrested yesterday in Clarksdale, Mississippi. For murder. Bill stopped mid-sip and stared at me. Is that true? Or you just said it to see if I'm paying attention? No, they say he killed his father, Leland Tam. He says he didn't. My mother says he didn't. Who is it who says he did? Why did they arrest him? I'm not clear on the details, but they seem to have found him standing over his father in the family grocery store with blood on his clothes and Jefferson's prints on the knife. I see. And what makes your mother so sure he didn't do it? Because, I looked square at Bill, no one related to my father could have done such a thing. Bill raised his eyebrows. Well, if that's her thinking, I've got to say she's entirely compos mentis in her own inimitable way. What's your sense? Do you think she's right? About my father's relations? I doubt it. I sat back. About this guy, I'd have to meet him to say. Like I told you, I never even knew these people existed. Okay, and what is it we're supposed to do down there? For one thing, be Chinese. I'm not very good at that. Har har. I think my mother's idea is there might be things he's not telling a white lawyer, but he'll tell me, his Chinese cousin. Did he grow up down there? Yes. Then Yankee might trump both Chinese and cousin, and he'll freeze you out too. I put my tea on the side table. I guess the whole situation's a little unclear to me. Stuff your mother doesn't know? Because she didn't ask. He's a relative of my sainted father, so he's innocent, they'll get him out of jail. It's sweet she still thinks of your father that way. Yes, well, it gave her an unfair advantage after he died. She invoked him all the time. We half believed he was standing right beside her, watching us from the other world. He probably was. He's probably here right now. Hi there, Mr. Chin. Could you remind your daughter how much she loves me? She forgets all the time. You can't do that, dummy. Ghosts can't lie. So, you're really in? Come on, you didn't actually think I'd turn you down. I thought you might turn my mother down. See aforementioned forlorn hope of nicer treatment. But speaking of forlorn hopes, we really know nothing about this Jefferson Tam. Mississippi justice has a bad rep, but even a blind squirrel sometimes finds an acorn. Is that a Southern saying? They have an endless number of those, just wait. The point is, this kid might not be a saint like your father. Your mother might find herself disappointed in him. And by extension, in me, you mean? If you have to be the messenger bearing the bad news, yes. I sighed. I thought of that. Maybe he did do it, and I'll have to figure out some way to tell her he's not what she thought he was. But the thing is, my mother's never asked me to take a case before. A milestone, I agree, showing a good deal of faith in you. It's more even than the faith. It's that she's finally sort of admitting this is my job. I looked for the words to explain it to him. My parents were thrilled when I was born. They didn't want a fifth son. They wanted a daughter. My mother made all these little flowered dresses. But I had 4 brothers to play with, and besides, I could look around the schoolyard and see who was having all the fun. When I turned out to be this jock tomboy type, my father kind of enjoyed it. We went to ball games and he enrolled me in a dojo. My mother's always been disappointed though. She doesn't like it that I'm a PI, but the problem goes deeper than that. It's I waved my mug at my jeans, my boots, my short hair, my whole unmarried, non-girly girl self. Bill gazed at me. You sure she's disappointed? Not just worried about you? Why should she worry? Because where she came from, an unmarried woman was prey to every man who came along, and likely to be misused, abandoned, and in the end, starved to death? I stared. That's not only extraordinarily feminist of you, it's bizarrely empathetic toward my mother. She's not always wrong, your mother, just about me. I drank my tea, which I was grateful to find tasted just like I thought it would, seeing as how the rest of the world was upside down. So, Bill said, when do we leave? You sure? He didn't dignify that with an answer, which if it were Bill asking me to do something like this, I wouldn't have either. Tomorrow morning. I smiled. Thanks. He returned the smile, our eyes met, and I went quickly back to business. The closest airport's Memphis. There's an 8 a.m. flight. Ugh. Ugh, Memphis? No, I love Memphis. Ugh, 8 a.m. Bill's a night owl. I'm an early bird. I shrugged. You know, that means we have to leave for the airport at 6, he persisted. We can watch the sun come up. There's no later plane? Not one that gets us there early. He nodded slowly and said, maybe that connecting door is not such a hot idea. Told you. Anyway, when we get there, we'll rent a car and drive to Clarksdale, which I understand is about an hour south, and meet the client. Wait, I thought your mother was the client. Technically, no. She might never have known about this murder, but a guy named Captain Pete called and asked for her help, actually, for my help. Generally, when people come to my mother to ask for me, she tells them to go fry ice. But I guess because this is family, it's different. I'm having a little difficulty following this part of the story. Do I get in trouble if I ask who Captain Pete is? Pete Tam, from Clarksdale, the uncle of the victim and the great-uncle of the suspect. He's the guy who sent the flowers to my father's funeral. Apparently, another cousin of mine. Okay, now, explain something else. If all these are male cousins on your father's side, he paused, I nodded. How come they're Tams, not Chins? Because, I said, the original one, Chin Sung, came here as a paper son. That's it.
Thank you.
That's basically what I have. And that book will be available sometime next year. So to find out what happened, stay tuned.
Thank you, S.J. We will look forward to that book, trust me. Ovidia Yu is an award-winning playwright and crime fiction writer, and she's had over 30 plays produced in Singapore, Malaysia, the UK, Australia, and here in the United States. Her plays have won several prestigious awards, including the Edinburgh Fringe First Award, the National Arts Council Young Artist Award, the Singapore Foundation Award, among many, many others. Her powerful play, Hitting on Women, tackles the difficult theme of abuse within a lesbian relationship, and the play won 2 Life Theater Awards. She received a Fulbright scholarship to the University of Iowa International Writing Program and holds a master's and PhD from Cambridge University.
No, I don't.
You don't?
I
Well,
don't.
it said you did.
Oh,
my
sorry.
goodness gracious.
You do now. I don't know.
Okay, well, she doesn't hold those degrees. However,
But she doesn't need them.
she doesn't need them with all those awards. In addition to her love of literature, Ovidia also loves crime, or at least crime fiction, and writing crime fiction. And her Aunty Lee series features the brilliant crime-solving mind of a beloved Singaporean cook-restaurateur, Aunty Lee. And Ovidia is going to be reading from Aunty Lee's Chilled Revenge. Please welcome Ovidia Yu.
Thank you. Thank you. And I apologize again. I can get lost anywhere. I'm going to read a short segment. Aunty Lee put her hand on Josephine's upper arm. You are worrying too much, lah, girl. When you are old like me, you will wish you didn't take things so seriously and enjoyed your young life more. But things are serious, Josephine's careful social facade faltered, but she sat down. How serious? The man don't want you? The man don't want your baby? You tell me who it is, I go and hantam him. Hantam is Malay Singlish for beat or hit, and Aunty Lee's threat carried all the ferocity of a plump chicken cackling angrily at a stationary pile driver. Josephine laughed, letting some of her tension go. Despite the garrulous surface chatter, she saw Aunty Lee was studying her with kind, non-judgmental curiosity. Even though the throb of her ever-present headache and twinge of nausea was still there, she could tell there was nothing malicious in Aunty Lee. Aunty Lee wanted to know more in the same way a new lover would. To her, feeding people was a calling rather than a career, and to do that well, she had to understand the people she was feeding. That's not a problem at all. We are getting married. It's just that, well, he's not from around here and it's complicated. You know what parents are like. Parents always worry lah, Aunty Lee agreed, but they only want what is best for you. Josephine shook her head with a small but genuine smile this time. It was nice of the old woman, even if she didn't know anything. It's complicated, she repeated. Aunty Lee nodded. Once she got hold of the man's name, she would have Nina look him up online. It's complicated rang all kinds of alarm bells in Aunty Lee's head. Was it Mike Fitzgerald, the dead woman's ex-husband? That would definitely be complicated. You young women think that getting married is not important. But if you get married, you got 2 names to put on the birth certificate. You got double chance to get into a good school. Is your sweet good man from a good school? He's not from around here, Josephine said again. There was a small smile on her face now and a faraway look in her eyes. Maybe we won't be needing a Singapore school, Aunty Lee continued undaunted. Not in Singapore or not from Singapore, both. And I mean, he's not in Singapore, he's not from Singapore, no, neither. If the man's only drawback was his geographical location, then he might do very well, Aunty Lee thought. Ah, that's why you're so sad, is it? Don't worry lah, nowadays, all you young people non-stop fly here, fly there, frequent flyer everywhere. What is the problem? You tell your parents, once you teach him to eat Singapore food, then he will be Singaporean, no? Case closed. So, are you getting married and getting baby? You should look more happy now, Aunty Lee said. What is his name? Then when can you bring him here to eat in my cafe? Like I said, it's complicated. Even my parents don't know yet, so please don't say anything. Ah, don't worry, Aunty Lee said with deliberate vagueness. Aunty Lee was genuinely fond of Josephine's mother, and it was no more than her responsibility to find out what was going on for Connie's sake, even if she never told Connie what she learned. I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. So now we have the pleasure of a conversation with these 2 terrific writers, these fabulous women, writing about other fabulous women, Lydia Chin and, of course, Aunty Lee. So I prepared a series of questions that I'd like to discuss with our 2 authors. And then after our discussion, we can have a bite and a little reception and book signing. Okay. So, SJ and Ovidia, this is a question to both of you. Each of you have other skills and other careers. SJ, you're a trained architect, and Ovidia, you're also a noted playwright. These are both very gold-plated kind of professions. So with all of these very sort of high-class professions on your resume, what drew you to crime fiction's pleasures of murder and mayhem? So I'd like each of you to tell us how you came to write murder and mayhem, to write crime fiction.
It's a bigger
SJ,
jump
we'll
from an
begin with you.
architect.
Oh, it's a bigger jump from architecture. Yeah, I always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to write, and I always wanted to write crime fiction. To me, especially the private eye novel, is about moral ambiguity. It's about things that matter. Somebody is dead. That matters. And literary fiction, much of which is wonderful, has no earth story behind it. It has no bigger story. Each book is about what it's about. Crime is about explanation. People read crime because in real life, things happen to you, and for no particular reason. You know, you walk out of here, you get hit by a bus, and you're dead. And people say, what happened? Well, you know, you got hit by a bus. In a crime story, the bus driver was waiting because he hated you, or somebody pushed you in front of the bus, or there's a reason. There's an explanation, and that's what people are looking for, and that's why they read this stuff, because the writer can set it up so that there is an explanation. And that's what I wanted to explore important issues like life and death, and people's motivations. That's what really intrigues me. I'm not a CSI type very much, but but people's motivations. Why? What is that moment that makes a person otherwise, like the rest of us, decide that the way to get out of a bad situation is to kill someone? That's what I'll do. That's a reasonable way out. Well, it's not. It never is. But there's a moment when somebody can't see another explanation, another path, and to me that moment is absolutely fascinating. So that's the answer.
And Ovidia, what drew you to writing crime fiction?
I love reading crime fiction, and like she said, it's the life and death and what can pressure you to go over the brink. I like exploring that. What really drives people, because if I asked you what do you like eating, what do you like drinking, where do you like to party, it's like it's all I can change. But if something could drive you to kill somebody, that's going to focus everything, and everything in your life is colored or not by that. And there are a lot of other issues I like to look at too, which you can deal with in the parameter of a crime novel. And no matter how good or bad those things are, compared to life and death, they are not that serious. So you can discuss a lot of things and a lot of social issues and all that within the framework of a crime fiction, because the good and the bad are so outlined there. And you can make it come out as you want to, as so often in life it doesn't.
Yeah,
and that is very satisfying when things frustrate you in real life. But can we ask her why she wrote about Cantor Gold?
Well, we can. Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Why I wrote about
Yeah,
Cantor
because you did the same thing.
Yes.
Well,
And this was not your background either.
Yeah.
no. In fact, one of the questions I have for you brings in my background, so we'll get to that in a minute. But why I wrote about Cantor Gold. Cantor Gold is an art thief and a smuggler in 1950s New York. She's a very out lesbian. She dresses well, she makes a ton of money, at a time when being an LGBT person was against the law. You could be arrested for just being who you are. And so she feels that since she's already labeled a criminal by society, by the law, she doesn't owe the law any allegiance at all. So she decides to live her life as a criminal. So I write from the point of view of the criminal, where unlike Ovidia and SJ, where justice is served by finding the criminal and the criminal goes to jail, in the world that I write about, the choices are very different. In order to survive, they have to do, as Jay says, morally questionable things. That doesn't mean they don't have any honor or sense of right and wrong. They're just different because they have to survive under different circumstances. So for me, a crime novel is an exploration, like these other novelists, of that moment of when you cross the line of right and wrong, but there's a different definition of right and wrong. It's inside out. There's a different definition of good and evil. It's more inside out. It's from the other side of the equation. And that's why I wrote her.
You are sort of moral but not legal. You are moral.
Moral but not legal,
Yes.
yeah. And the definition of legality between then and now, of course, has changed.
Right.
But people ask me, well, why do you write about a lesbian in the 1950s? We have more civil rights now. Will it resonate with people? Well, it turns out that it does, because whether you're a person of color or you're an LGBT person, whoever you are, a woman, whoever you are, the fight for dignity, for civil rights, for having the law look at you as if you were a full citizen is not over. So reading about a woman who takes that circumstance into her own hands at great risk and knows the difference between rights, which are conferred by people who have the authority to give them, and freedom, which is a way of life, people do enjoy it from that basis. And most of all, as we all know, any crime writers, crime is juicy.
Yes.
People love crime. It's like, and in people also like it, in my case, when the criminal gets away with it.
Yeah, and there's another thing about crime, which is that what you're reading is not what happened. What happened is below that. It happened before, and what you're doing is unraveling what happened. And that actually is true in life a lot, only we never get to unravel it.
Right.
So in a crime novel, you do.
So this tells us why we each write what we write. Now, Ovidia, I have a question for you. And we're getting into sort of the cultural issues connected to the Singapore Literary Festival. So, in your Aunty Lee series, in the Singapore of Aunty Lee, in Aunty Lee's world of Singapore, in addition to Singapore's very diverse Asian population, there's also the presence of Westerners. There's sort of the leftover British from the colonial days, and some spare Americans running around, and so on. And in Aunty Lee's Chilled Revenge depicts these Westerners as Westerners fitting into Asian culture, okay, with varying degrees of success or comfort. Whereas in S.J.'s work, and I've read Ghost Hero, and in your other work as well, the cultural situation is inside out, where you have Asian, Lydia Chin and her Chinatown community fitting into a Western culture. So the two of you are approaching these cultural sort of fitting innesses from the opposite points of entry. So I'd like each of you to discuss your approach. And Ovidia, why don't we start with you, about Westerners fitting into Asian culture in Singapore?
Actually, I didn't really think of them as Westerners fitting in. They're just people who happen to live in Singapore. And Singapore is very small, and practically all of us are immigrants or children of immigrants. I mean, I'm older than the country is. So unless you're one of the Bumiputra, unless you are one of the sons of the soil and you are actually born there, which is a minority, you came in, or your parents came in, or your grandparents came in. So even for the white people, we love the Caucasians and the Eurasians right now, because one of the Eurasian boys, Michael Schooling, just won our first gold medal. So at the moment, we love the Caucasian side and the Eurasian side. But I don't think I really see them as outsiders. The people who I was looking at here are people who came in as tourists and were sort of making trouble, or they came in as expats.
Right.
And that's very different from the Caucasians, the Westerners who actually live in Singapore, who are much more integrated and who are often with their kids in school and everything. They can be more Singaporean than us in some ways. So, no, there's a difference between the expats living in Singapore as expats with the big allowances and the Westerner living in Singapore as Singaporeans, I think.
I see. And S.J., you tell us about how you feel about Lydia Chin. And Lydia actually lives in Chinatown and works in Chinatown. Her office is in Chinatown, and she has, she's very much part of the Chinatown community. And the Chinatown community, as many of you know, walking through Chinatown right here in New York, is a community that is doing its best to maintain its own culture and yet fit in to their new life, into the Western world. So if you can address that.
Yeah, the ethnic communities in New York are really interesting, because you can, when you're, if you're of that ethnic group and you live there, that you are of the majority. And I have friends who went to school in Chinatown in classes full of other Chinese students. You might as well be in any city in Asia, see people who look like you. But when you leave Chinatown, which is relatively small, or when you, in the old days when you left Little Italy has left you now, but you would go and there would be other people, all these other people who were not like you. Lydia's mother rarely goes outside of Chinatown. She doesn't drive. She doesn't speak very good English. She doesn't know why you would. What's out there? Well, her sons are out there, so her 4 kids, so she goes out, but that's it, I find it really interesting. Now, Lydia was born here. Lydia is second generation. That is first generation here. Her parents were the immigrants. And I find that situation really interesting, because she is not Chinese like her parents are and like the way her mother would want her to be. She's certainly not white. And she is, she feels at home and not quite at home in both worlds. And that is really interesting, because that's the position of the outsider, which is where the private eye always is anyway, either by choice, as in Bill's case, or by circumstance, as in Lydia's. And that's a place from which you can observe and maneuver and solve crime, but never quite be part of things. And in this case, when they go to Mississippi, of course,
In Paper Sun.
in Paper Sun,
Yeah.
yeah, Lydia is completely, it's like, what? Who are these people? Which was my reaction when I went to Mississippi. And there was another book in which, Reflecting the Sky, in which they went to Hong Kong, where Bill had been, Lydia had never been. But Lydia looks the part and speaks the language, but she doesn't know how to get around. Bill knows exactly how to take the Star Ferry, but he will never look like he belongs there. And that was an interesting situation for me to work in. So it's all about belonging and being on the edges. And the first time I went to Singapore, I was sitting having a cup of coffee. I was extremely jet lagged, and I was sitting having a cup of coffee early in the morning, and I'm looking around, and I'm thinking, this is the only place I've ever been where you can't even guess as people walk down the street who is a native, who is an expat, and who is a tourist. There's no reason you would know.
Not by looking.
Not by looking, yeah. And I thought, that's fabulous. There's no other place in the world like that, not even New York.
Really, not even New York?
Not even New York, because in New York you sort of, it's a default thing. In New York you figure, there's white people and there's immigrants, and the immigrants aren't white and the white people aren't immigrants. It's, and then you have to start to think, wait, no, actually that's probably wrong. But it's your instinct. In Singapore, I had no instinct. I realized everybody walking by could, that tall redheaded guy could be 6 generations here, And the Chinese guy could be, just sent over by his firm from Beijing. You can't tell.
Or from New York.
Or from New York, right. And I loved it. I loved that about it.
Let's get to the women's issue kind of thing, because the name of this panel, this discussion is Killer
Now we're
Women.
going to play the woman card, huh?
We're going to play the woman card now, absolutely, yes. So each of you each treat the strength of your female protagonists from an opposite lens. In Ovidia, in your work, Aunty Lee's crime-solving abilities really is rooted in her personal composure, in her strength of mind. She's not an action hero. She doesn't get out there. She's actually, in Aunty Lee's Chilled Revenge, she's actually walking with a cane. She's older. So her strength of mind is what enables her to puzzle out the personalities and the contradictions in people, and she uses that knowledge to unravel the facts and get to the bottom of the crime. In S.J.'s work, in your work, Lydia Chin's crime-solving strength seems to me very rooted in her sense of purpose. This is the job that must be done. She has this client, and so she has this sense of purpose, that she's been hired to do a job and she will do it well. And she even accepts the presence of action, even violence if necessary. She's willing to experience personal risk to get to the bottom of a crime. So there are other characters in each of your books which display other facets of a woman's strength, a female strength. In Ovidia, in your work, there's Nina, the Filipina foreign guest worker, who has her own kind of inner strength. And then there's Lydia Chin's mother, and Anna Yang's mother in Ghost Hero. And these are two, when you read Ghost Hero, they're really very strong, quiet, but with an inner strength, a backbone. So talk to me a little bit and tell us how you deal with a woman's strength and what you bring to them in your story. So SJ, Ovidia, whoever wants to go first.
All right, well, Lydia has 4 older brothers and was raised here. So she is, as she said in the piece, a jock, a tomboy. She likes action. When she has no cases, she's out rollerblading or at the dojo, or she's doing something. She likes that part of life. She also has a little bit of a chip on her shoulder. She's a small Chinese woman. She did have these 4 older brothers who were, she was a little pest. And so she's gonna solve this case. She's not gonna let things go wrong, and this is who she is. The older generation, her mother left China, lived in Hong Kong for a while before they were able to come here. Isn't quite so eager to engage with the world on a lot of levels, but also is very observant and has her own slant on things. And Anna's mother is
She's tough as nails.
even more. She's a very tough woman, and yet Anna doesn't see a lot of that because until you need it, she doesn't display it. And this, to me, is the generation of women of my mother's generation who were not action heroes, but they were heroes in a different way. They basically drew the line in the sand and said, this is my family and this is what's happening, and I am going to do everything I have to make sure that these people are protected and this works out all right. And, then we all went off and became the action heroes. And there's a number of approaches that women can take. You can't ignore the fact, yet, that you're a woman. You can't just, it's not the same. Lydia is not the same as Bill.
No.
And in fact, she has more of a chip on her shoulder about that than he does.
Yeah.
Because he's perfectly willing to admit that she's better than he is at some things, and she can shoot better. But she would challenge him to a duel at any moment. So there are different kinds of women and strong in different ways.
And Ovidia, how do you see Aunty Lee's strength as a woman who figures out crime?
Actually, you said strength of mind, which isn't, I think it's not quite strength of mind. Does anybody know the Singaporean terms kepo, kiasu, mzaisi? Okay, some do. Yes. Kepo is like, well, all Singaporeans, but especially the women, it's a busybody thing. You want to know everything about everybody all the time. So Aunty Lee is a kepo. Kiasu, literally translated, means scared to lose, but it also means you don't go late for things, which is why I feel so bad about today. You don't come in last in school. You do everything. It has to be kiasu. I'm going to get in and do the right thing all the time. That's why Singapore is how it is, because we are all very kiasu. If there's a queue, you join it, and then you find out what you're queuing for. But you're not going to lose out. And mzaisi, okay, it's from Malay and it's from Hokkien. Mzaisi is from the Hokkien. Not scared to die. Literally, which means you will do whatever it takes to get where you want to go. You charge in first and then you worry later. If you're going to build a good airport, you throw in everything first and then later on you figure how you're going to pay for it. And you do somehow, but mzaisi means you go ahead and you do it. And these three characteristics are very much, I think, in the Singaporean mind. And the reason it's in older women like Aunty Lee is because a lot of our men and older boys got wiped out during the Second World War, which is why a lot of families after the Second World War were brought up by strong women, those who survived. So you had a generation brought up by mothers and aunts and all the leftovers from the men, especially the Chinese men who were taken off and killed. So one generation grew up with very strong women as role models because there were very few other people. And this is a generation that, in spite of how they might have felt, were nice to Japanese soldiers, so they got extra food for their children, and so that they could feed the Australian soldiers who were hiding in the jungles without giving them the idea that we are hiding people. And this generation survived on those characteristics. And I suppose now we are friendly with everybody and we import a lot from Japan, so we like them as well. But the characteristics remain, and I think we haven't quite lost that drive to get ahead. It's almost too much sometimes. But that drives Aunty Lee, I think. So she wants to set everybody's life right for them if she can. The unfortunate thing is she tries to set them right her way, which not everybody agrees with now.
This is true, especially her relationship with the police was particularly interesting to me. On the one hand, they respected her because they knew that she could, think things through. She could see things in people that maybe the police, with all their procedures and all of that, all the paperwork was sort of clouding the issue. But Aunty Lee, being the busybody, could get inside to people's situations. And I found that a particularly sort of female characteristic because, we all grew up, I know I did, with mothers like that. You know, the old backyard fence idea, although here in New York it was, you know, out along the washing line at the back window, where, right, all those mothers and grandmothers, what we think of now as gossip, what they were doing was finding out what was going on in the neighborhood, if you grew up here in New York, as I did, and as you did. So it's a very similar kind of idea.
There's another thing I think about Aunty Lee is that she gets this information, and a couple of times in that book, in Aunty Lee's Children's Revenge, she says, okay, you know, there's no hurry. You know, I now know this, and now we'll eat. There's so much food in that book, and
Yes,
fabulous.
wonderful.
And then, you know, tomorrow we'll do this. You know, it's she's not pressuring herself.
Mm-hmm.
She knows her methods. She knows her own, and she just adds it all up, and she's very calm about it, and that's kind of wonderful.
I have aunts like that.
Do you?
Whatever is happening, you eat first.
Right, yeah. And that is
Yes.
Aunty Lee's, you know, the problem will still be here after dinner.
Yes.
Yeah, and reading Aunty Lee's Children's Revenge, every time I would read a chapter, you know, I would read it each night in bed and this and that through my day. Whenever I finished reading for the day or the evening, I was hungry. I needed to eat.
And a lot of that food you can't get in New York.
No, but I was
So, you know,
starving.
you kind of remember the last
I
time you
just-
ate it in Singapore.
When I spoke to you the other night, I said, I've got to go to Singapore. I have to eat. I simply have to eat. This
Yes,
is
you
just
should come here and eat.
reading this book is, I'm starving.
And you have to go to
This-
Aunty Lee's. You can't just go to Singapore.
You have to go to Aunty Lee's. So I have two last questions for each of you. So SJ, this is for you. You've set ghost hero in the New York art world. Now, with my particular background as a curator and an exhibition designer for years, I can tell you absolutely nailed it. The competitiveness, the backbiting, the jealousies, and the great creative talents that are genuine, that sort of support it all. And you've concentrated the book's plot specifically in the field of Chinese art and the competition to collect it among today's moneyed collectors. Why did you choose this milieu for the novel, and how did you research this incredible, I'm telling you, you really nailed it. How did you get it?
Well, I mean, it works a little bit the other way. I never write about anything I'm not interested in. And the art world has always fascinated me because it's hilarious. You know, there's huge amounts of money that run around. And a lot of it is just investing. It has nothing to do with art. Some of it does have to do with art, but somebody with a lot of money can anoint an artist whom nobody else ever heard of, who suddenly becomes hot. And then that style of art becomes hot. And it isn't clear why. But on the other hand, as you say, every now and then there are fabulous, beautiful things or powerful things or things that in some way are really meaningful that slip through these filters. The personalities are all outsized. I did another book, Skin of the Wolf, that a lot of it is set in Sotheby's for the same reason. I couldn't stand it. It's just like, these people are amazing. But I wanted, the thing about especially Chinese art, contemporary Chinese art, is that when it first burst on the Western art world, it was at a point, a certain loosening of things in China, and things began to come here, and a lot of it looked political, and people were snapping it up. A lot of it was very bad art, qua art, but it was a political statement from China, and so we are really cutting edge if we have that on our wall. And the Chinese artists caught on to this and said, if I make another one of those, I can make another, $100,000 in the West. And the political art fast became, art produced for the West, like export porcelain,
Exactly.
which also fascinated me. And so the research was not hard at all, because a lot of it involved, going to galleries.
Yeah.
You get frozen out by 2 or 3 galleries in a day, and you've got everything you need. I also talked to a lot of young Chinese artists and an older Chinese artist who had been here for many years. And I saw some of their studios, and that was the group studio in Queens.
In Queens, yeah.
Is similar to one that I saw,
Yeah.
Which I think is no longer functioning, but that people get together, and you know, the very few of the pieces in that book are real. I invented most of them. One or two of them are, but not the horrible ones. The horrible ones I invented. But I found these people so fascinating. From every level, the artists who are actually trying to produce something, the artists who are faking it, the gallery owners, the reviewers, the experts. They're just waiting for a writer to come along and paint their picture. So I did.
I really liked how you did it felt so it felt like a Chinese person writing when you, okay, I shouldn't give it all away, but when the younger person's brush strokes were what gave away that this was not the old master.
Passages.
Yes.
They were lovely passages.
And that's so Chinese, you know, from the strength of the brush stroke and the maturity, you can tell whether it's a young person or old person or...
Yeah, those were really beautiful passages.
That was I did study on that.
Yeah. And Ovidia, a question for you. Now, though Aunty Lee's Chilled Revenge is a murder story, excuse me, Aunty Lee's personal environment is very warm and friendly in her restaurant. It's peopled by family and friends, and much of the action takes place either in Aunty Lee's home or in her cafe. And the name of her cafe is very warmly named Aunty Lee's Delight. So you've set up this very cozy, warm environment, but hovering over all this warmth in the book Aunty Lee's Chilled Revenge is a very chilling incident: the intentional killing of a puppy. That's awful, puppy death. It's an act which sets the stage for the later murders of the veterinarian Samantha Kang and one of the Love sisters, one of the sisters who's one of the protagonists of the book. Puppy murder is certainly a very gutsy, if emotionally difficult, plot device, and gives the book this kind of hovering sense of dread. How did you come up with it? What's behind? Where did you have the guts to come up with puppy murder, which is just awful?
It happened in Singapore.
Oh, God.
And it made me mad. Some of you might have heard of it. An expat family adopted a puppy and wanted to return it. They said, "Can you wait until the weekend? We're going to find a new home for it." And when they went back to get it, they found it had been put down, and she lied about it. She said, "Oh, I gave it to a friend." And when they wanted to know who's a friend, because the animal rehomers are very particular about following up on cases, then she got angry with them. She called the police and said they were trespassing and harassing her. And this is all for real.
Oh my God! So you used that as the central core of your book.
Totally, because it was better than going out and hunting her down. And the police said, "Why didn't you just tell them where the puppy has gone?" And that's it. And then she said she just had it put down because the dog was aggressive, which is the first we heard of the puppy being aggressive. And the puppy had bitten her and her husband. But the puppy they had a dog psychologist, they all do, and then the puppy was happy, good-natured, and small. Small puppies bite people, they don't mean to. So there was a big furore in Singapore, and Singaporeans get very worked up about things, and we get very worked up online, so people were writing into her husband's company saying, "Don't bring in expats like that because your wives are bad for the country." Saying that she was trying to get a part-time job somewhere, and they were saying that you should fire her because she's a bad influence. If she can poison dogs, she can kill anybody.
Oh my goodness.
No, it was a big internet thing. So actually this was also to show the effect it might have on a person who's a victim of this kind of media.
I see. Yeah.
Yes.
And there was this harassment of her. But, as I'm reading this and, talking about this puppy death, it was just... it just chilled me to the bone.
You can kill as many people as you want,
but
just don't hurt
a
puppies.
Puppy.
Yes.
And the last question for you, for both of you, what's next for each of you? What books or plays or projects are you each involved in, very briefly?
Well, Paper Sun is the one I'm writing right now, which is set in the Mississippi Delta. The one that will come out before it is a standalone thriller set in Mongolia. The Republic of, not inner.
Right.
And, it involves a whole bunch of people running around looking for the treasure that Kublai Khan buried, which of course they find, and it turns out to be not what they thought, but that's what happens in thrillers. So that will come out first, and then, Lydia and Bill will be back with Paper Sun, and then after that, there will be a Bill book called Mayors of New York.
Oh, very good. And Ovidia, what's on tap for you?
The next book that's coming out is called The Frangipani Tree Mystery, but this one's going to be published in the UK, not here.
Uh-huh.
But I hope to find something here, and it's a colonial crime set between the two wars in Singapore.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Oh, very interesting, yeah.
Just before the Japanese, and roughly based on real people too, but I had to change their names.
Of course.
And I'm writing the next Aunty Lee at the moment.
Aha, very
Yes,
good. Oh, I
so-
look forward to that. Very good. Well, thank you both very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
There's books over here for all you to purchase, and I encourage you to do so because writers exist to sell books. And you're welcome to some soda and some water and to ask us any questions. And we'll be here for the next 15 or 20 minutes, and then we have to go up to another event. So
And
thank
at
you
this
all
time,
for
We're
coming.
taking the subway, so you.
We're going to drag you to the subway. And they're holding the tickets for us. It's okay.
Thank you.
So thank you all very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you.